Good morning, Year 4. A bright day today. Puts a smile on my face and I hope it's put a smile on yours. So, let's get straight on. Our character has found himself with the elephant and he's now lost in the he's lost in the jungle. Our character Will, if you remember. He's looked back and he's seen tsunami coming in. So he's panicking a lot. He's got a lot to think about. So let's move straight on. I lay like this in my howdah for days and nights on end. I must have drunk from time to time from the bottle of water that Mum had given me. I don't really remember doing it, but I must have done, because I woke up once to discover that the bottle was empty. I kept slipping in and slipping out of my dreams, not wanting to wake at all, because I knew that when I did, I'd remember all over again everything that had happened to me and all that it meant. That I had no father, and now I had no mother, and that I myself would very probably die out here in this jungle. I was so tired and weak and dispirited by this time that I didn't much mind if I actually did. My only comfort was the regular rocking motion of the elephant beneath me. I became so attuned to it that I always woke whenever it stopped. Often I would hear Una tugging at the branches, then grunted contentedly as she grazed the forest, and from time to time, whenever she flapped her ears, I'd feel a cooling breeze wafting over me. I came to love those moments. And when I'd heard the sound of her dung falling, I became accustomed to waiting for the smell of it to reach me. It wasn't unpleasant, not the worst smell that you could have, and anyway, not as bad as humans make. In fact, I didn't find it unpleasant at all. It was strangely reassuring, and it made me smile. I woke up one morning to feel the soft tip of Una's trunk touching me. She was breathing me in, exploring every part of me, from my face to my feet. When she tickled my neck, I couldn't help laughing a little, and then without thinking about it, I reached out and touched her trunk. As I did so, Una left her where it was, deliberately it seemed to me, and let me run my fingers along it as she breathed gently in my face. It was like the breath of new life. I knew then that I wasn't alone in the world, that I had a friend, and that I wanted to survive, and that somehow I had to survive, so I could go back to the coast and find Mum. But with all this newfound will to live came a sudden unbearable hunger, and with it an overwhelming thirst, a craving for water so strong and all-consuming that I could think of nothing else. I did sometimes manage to grab an overhanging leaf and lick the rainwater from it. Whenever it rained, I cupped my hands and catch all that I could, but there was never enough to even begin to quench my thirst, let alone fill the bottle, which was what I knew I had to do if I wanted to survive. I tried to make Una understand this every time we came to a stream, and there were enough of those in the jungle, but every time Una just waded on through and wouldn't stop. I tried whispering gently to her, as I had seen the boy do back down on the beach, but it proved to be of no use at all. Shouting at her and slapping her neck didn't work either, neither did begging or pleading. Stream after stream we crossed, and all I could do each time was gaze longingly down at the rushing water below me that I so longed to be drinking, but was already leaving behind me. Again and again I seriously considered standing up in the howdah and then throwing myself off into the water when we came to the next stream. I would pick my moment, decide where the water was at its deepest, and leap. I could do it. I could swim well enough. I was the best in my class at school. Better than Charlie or Bart or Tonk. That wasn't my worry. I had other anxieties. If I got it wrong, I could land badly on hidden rocks beneath the surface. I could break a leg or even my neck. And I knew that rocks weren't the only danger lurking beneath the surface. I was sure there were crocodiles in this river too. I was sure because I'd caught a glimpse of one, half submerged. It had looked like a log, but if so, it was a log with a tail, and a tail that moved too. And anyway, even if there were no crocodiles down there waiting for me, even if I had the best of landings and I had a long, cold drink I was yearning for and managed to fill up my water bottle, would Una stand there and wait while I drank? And even if she did, how was I going to climb back upon her again, into the safety of the howdah? Getting on and off this elephant was something I just didn't know how to do on my own. The last time that I'd had to do it, days before now, the boy had been there to help me up, but I couldn't remember for the life of me how he got me up there. All that seemed to have happened so long ago now. Before the wave came, Mum had been there. Had she helped me up? I couldn't remember. I didn't want to remember. My longing for food was becoming every bit as frustrating and urgent as my longing for water. It wasn't as if there wasn't a fruit in abundance all around me in the jungle, but none of it was fruit I recognised, and anyway I couldn't get at it. I was looking for bananas. I thought there must be bananas in a jungle, but so far I could see that there was none. There was a small pinky red fruit that was shaped something like a banana, but these were always tantalisingly out of reach, so I passed underneath. There were sometimes coconuts, orange, not brown, but anyway, they were always growing far too high up, and those that had fallen on the forest floor were just, of course, as inaccessible to me as those above. There was plenty of other strange fruits I certainly would have tried, had I been able to get near enough, or quick enough to grab them. But Una always swayed on, blithely by, quite oblivious it seemed to all my needs. And all this time she was adding insult to injury, because of course Una could reach her trunk whenever she felt like it, and with a tug at an overhanging branch was able to pull it down and eat her fill and move on. Worse still, she looked and sounded as if she was enjoying every moment of her feasting. I could only sit there and listen to her great jaws grinding away, to her almost constantly rumbling stomach. Elephant digestion, I was discovering, was noisy and infuriating, punctuated as it was by rumbling groans of the deepest satisfaction. In the end it all became too much for me to take. I bent down and bellowed into her ear. I knew it was pointless, but I did it all the same. "Food, Una! I want food! I want water!" She flapped her ears at me, then, as if she was batting away my words like irritating flies. But I kept on at her, whacking her as hard as I could, on her neck, on her back, anywhere I could hit her, trying everything and anything to make her listen. "I want to eat, Una," I cried. "Fruit! I need fruit! And water! I've got to have water! Please, Una, please! Can't you understand, Una? I'll die if I don't have a drink! I'll die!" In the time I discovered that all the bellowing and the whacking and the slapping was hurting me a great deal more than it was hurting her. My hands ached with it, my throat was raw with it, and whatever I said or did, the elephant was paying no attention at all, and that was for sure. She simply continued on her wandering way through the jungle, munching nonchalantly as she went, seemingly without a care in the world. I tried everything I knew, over and over again, but even as I was doing it, I could see it was useless, that neither sweet-talking, cajoling, begging, whacking, or threatening was ever going to work. This elephant would do what she would do, and that was that, and in the end I simply gave up trying. Exhausted and angry, I lay down in the howdah, which I now thought more of a cage than a throne, and sobbed. Into my head from nowhere came Dad's old joke, "You've got to chill, Will." I said it out loud then, as Dad would have said it, "You've got to chill, Will." Repeating his words time and time again was a comfort to me, somehow. It was the rhythm of them, maybe, or the familiarity. I longed for sleep because I longed to put out of my mind everything that had happened, all the discomforts I was enduring. It was the only way to forget the gnawing hunger in my stomach, that my tongue was leathery dry, and that my throat was parched and sore. Once, when sleep came at last, I heard Dad's words again in my dreams, and I saw him too. "You've got to chill, Will," he was saying. "You've got to keep it going. You can do it, Will." I was back in the sea at Weston when I was little. I was swimming towards Dad, who was holding his arms out towards me. I was kicking my legs frantically, trying all I could to keep my chin above water, trying to reach those outstretched hands before I sank. But the sea water kept coming into my mouth and was choking me. I woke then suddenly and sat up spluttering. For a few moments the sunlight blinded me. The elephant had stopped. There was a sound of rushing water all around me. I sat up. Una was standing in a river, the water washing over her back and up to her neck and her ears, so that the howdah was simply an island now. The river swirling all around, and somehow the howdah had worked itself loose. I could feel it shifting sideways off Una's back, so that some of my cushions were already waterlogged. The river was running fast, but I didn't hesitate. This was the chance I'd been waiting for. The shore wasn't that far away. I could make it. If there were crocodiles, I didn't care. I needed to have water. I had to drink. I put a foot on the rail and leapt off, and before I knew it I was in the river, swimming hard for the shore. Just a few strong strokes and I was there. I crouched at the river's edge and drank till I could drink no more, filling myself to bursting. Breathless with drinking now, and triumphant with it, I found myself laughing and whooping and slapping the water, filling the forest with my noise, sending thousands of screeching birds flying up out of the trees. Look at them, Una! Look! All I could see of Una was her head and her trunk. She seemed to have drifted further down the river and was right out in the middle now, where the flow was faster. I was confident I could swim that far, so without another thought I plunged in, but I found that the current was a great deal stronger than I had imagined, and I soon realised I wasn't going to make it. I just didn't have the strength to sustain the effort, so I had to turn back and swim hard for the shore to get myself out of trouble. It was a long swim, and I felt myself tiring fast, so it was a huge relief when I felt my feet touch the bottom and I could clamber out of the river at last. I looked round then to see where Una was. She had vanished. Panic-stricken at finding myself suddenly alone, I began calling out for her, tentatively at first, then louder and louder as my fears multiplied. My first thought was that Una must have gone off into the forest and abandoned me. I was sure of it. There could be no other explanation. With panic came hurt. I let her know just what I thought of her. "Go off and leave me then, you great lump. See if I care. I don't need you. You hear me? I don't need you." It was then that I caught sight of the howdah being swept away downriver towards the rocks, but there was still no sign of Una. The howdah sank as I watched. All I could see of it now were straps, and then my water bottle and a cushion from the howdah bobbing up and down away in the distance. As I stood there I was thinking that the bottle was the last thing that Mum had given to me, that my hat and my sun cream, all of which must have been at the bottom of the river by now, but by now with the howdah, and all I had left was what I stood up in, my shirt and my shorts. That was when Una erupted from under the water only a few metres from me, rising up to her full height with the water cascading from her, trunk flailing and splashing. When I got over my surprise I found myself overwhelmed with sudden joy and relief. All my earlier fury at her instantly forgotten. Una sank down again into the river, leaving only the great dome of her head and her eyes visible. It seemed to me that she'd been playing hide and seek with me, that this must be an invitation to come and play with her. It was an invitation I could not resist, and as I ran down the river I wondered how I could have ever doubted her. Una was better than any wave machine I had ever known. Whenever she rolled onto her side, she created huge waves that I would dive into. Time and again she'd submerge herself completely, then rear up out of the water, so that it came rushing down her sides like a waterfall, and I would stand beside her, shrieking under the shower that she was giving me. She swished her trunk at me, sprayed me with water. It was a performance, a game. I was in fits of laughter the whole time, and loving every moment of it. I remembered then the last time I had loved messing around in water like this. It had been with Dad at Weston. I remembered diving down and swimming between his legs, and when I came up again there had been a long galloping piggyback ride, out of the sea and up to the beach towards where Mum was waiting for us. She screamed at us not to drip on her, and we had, and as she knew we would, shaking ourselves like dogs all over her. It had all been so good. The whole day by the seaside at Weston came back to me, every detail of it. Then all the treasured memories of home, of Dad and Mum, of all of us together, of how everything had been before Dad had gone off to war, before the tidal wave. I felt suddenly racked by sadness and guilt. I left Una in the river and went to sit on the rocks. All I could think of was that nothing would ever be the same. Those days were gone forever. Mum and Dad were gone forever. I would never see them or hear their voices ever again. And what had I just been doing? A moment or two before I'd been having the time of my life, shrieking with laughter, as if none of this had ever happened, as if everything was just fine and dandy, as Grandpa used to say. Dad was dead, and down on the coast hundreds of people had been drowned by a tidal wave, thousands maybe, Mum among them. How could I have allowed myself to forget them both so quickly? How could I have been laughing when I should have been crying? But even as I was thinking this, even as I watched Una wafting her trunk at me from way out in the river, I found I was smiling inside myself, and I knew that there was nothing wrong with it, that Mum and Dad wouldn't mind. There was a hummingbird hovering nearby over a flower. She was so tiny, miraculously tiny and beautiful, and butterflies of all colours were chasing each other out of the water. That was the moment I felt all of the gloom and the guilt lifting from me. I was not thinking of the past any more, nor of Mum or Dad. I was thinking that if I had any family at all now, it was Una. It was a strange idea, I knew that, but the more I began to think about it, the more I believed it was true. As I sat there watching Una in the river, I began to take stock of my whole situation. I knew for certain that without Una, I would not have survived at all. I would have had no hope at all. I'd be utterly lost. I had only seen that one helicopter, and that was a few days ago, at least by now. The only evidence I'd seen of any human existence was the occasional glimpse of a vapour trail high in the sky, thousands of metres above the canopy. No one knew I was here. No one knew I was alive, so certainly no one would be out looking for me. I had ridden into this jungle on the elephant. If anyone knew the way out, I reckoned it was her. All I had to do then was stay with her and learn to live with her, and I'd be all right. One day, sooner or later, she'd be carrying me out of the jungle, just as she had carried me in. Meanwhile, I had to find some way of communicating with her, or getting her to understand I was starving hungry. I'd heard the boy talking to her down on the beach that morning, but it had been in his language, a language that I hadn't understood at all. Una, though, must have understood, though why would he have talked to her as much as he had? So if she had to understand his language, then she could learn English, it stood to reason. All I had to do was teach her. I remember how the boy always whispered to her. He never raised his voice. I would do the same. Somehow, I had to teach her to understand me. I wasted no time. As soon as Una came out of the water, I went right up to her. I held her trunk and stroked it as I talked to her, just as the boy had done. As I spoke, I was looking at her right in the eye, her wise, weepy eye. Una, I began, I know your name, but you don't know mine, do you? You don't know anything about me, so I better tell you. Here goes. I'm Will. I'm 9 years old, 10 soon. I live in Salisbury in England, which is a long way away, and that's where I go to school. My grandpa and grandma have a farm in Devon, where it's muddy, and he's got lots of cows and a tractor, and I go there for holidays. Dad was a soldier, and he was killed by a bomb in Iraq because there's a war there. And now I think Mum's dead too, drowned by that big wave, the one you saved me from. If you hadn't done that, then I'd be dead now like she is. But the thing you've got to understand is that I'll be dead anyway pretty soon, if you don't get some food to eat. I'm hungry, Una, really hungry. I need to eat. Understand? Eat. I opened my mouth wide, said "ah" several times, sticking my finger down my throat. Una looked down at me knowingly from a great height, so knowing that I felt she must be understanding at least the gist of what I was saying. Much encouraged by this, I went on. I rubbed my stomach. Yum, yum, food, food. Unblinking, she looked back at me. She was listening, I could tell that much, but now I wasn't so sure she'd understood a single word that I'd been saying. Maybe her eye wasn't knowing after all, just simply kind. I just didn't seem to be getting through to her. I had an idea. I decided I'd have to try another tack altogether. I ran off to the edge of the forest and came back after a while with a long leafy branch I'd torn from a tree. I offered it to her, hoping these might be the kind of leaves she liked. She sniffed at it for a few moments, then curled her trunk around it, ripped off what she wanted and shoved it into her mouth. Yes, yes, Una, I cried. You see? Food. Yum, yum. Me. Me too. I need food, but not leaves. I can't eat leaves. Fruit, fruit. As she chomped and chewed, her eyes never left me once, and from somewhere inside her there came a deep groan of contentment. I was hopeful that these were all signs that she understood now, that she was grateful to me for fetching her food, that she would do the same for me. But when she'd finished stuffing in the last of her leaves, all she seemed interested in was exploring my hair, and then my ears with her trunk. Exasperated now, I lost my patience. I pushed away and shouted at her, Can't you understand anything, you stupid elephant? I'm hungry. I want food. I have to have food. I looked around in desperation and saw there was some kind of red fruit. They looked like huge ripe plums, and they were growing high up in a tree on the far side of the river. There! Look! Una, look! That's what I want. It's too high for me to climb. I know you could. Please, Una, please. But Una just turned from me and began walking away from the river and up into the trees, her trunk searching out more leaves. Once she was busy eating again, I discovered that no amount of yelling or leaping up and down or slapping her leg would distract her. Una was feeding, and nothing and no one was going to stop her. I felt my eyes filling with tears. I tried to blink them back, but it was no good. They kept coming anyway. I sat down beside the river, clasped my knees to my chest, and let the tears flow. I was sobbing not out of self-pity or grief. There were no thoughts of mum or dad. I was crying out of fury and frustration and hunger too. I buried my face in my hands and rocked back and forth, moaning in my misery. When at last I did look up again, I saw that the howdah had now become firmly wedged between the rocks. It was obvious that there was no possible way I could retrieve it from the river. Without it, I knew I could never ride Una again, and without Una, how I was ever going to be able to find my way out of this, back to safety. Strangely, it was only now as I came to understand all this that I finally stopped crying and began to calm down and collect my thoughts. If I couldn't ride the elephant, and if she wouldn't find me food, then she couldn't save me. In which case I had to search for food myself, fend for myself. I had to find another way altogether of saving myself. There had to be a way out of the jungle. There was a way into this place, so there had to be a way out of it. I'd have to find that way out, that's all. Only moments later I knew what I had to do. It came to me as I watched the river running by. It was obvious. Why hadn't I thought of it before? I'd follow the river downstream. Didn't rivers always end up sooner or later in the sea? If I followed the river at least, I'd have water to drink, and I'd be bound to find something to eat on the way. Berries, nuts, roots, fish even. I could catch fish. Yes, I'd leave the elephant. That's what I'd do. There and then I made up my mind. I had to go it alone. Okay, we'll stop there. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have fun. Work hard. Get some fresh air. I'm feeling quite hungry now after reading all that, so I think I might go and get something to eat. Have a good day. Bye-bye.